Welcome to the ghost town. Because of popular demand, we're gonna do another ghost town tour. Since the last ghost town tour, I got a lot more information about the town I live in. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the history. And for instance, why people left here. Because I'm the mayor of this ghost town, I will conduct this tour. Just kidding, this village doesn't have a mayor. Let me take you down there. Welcome to Garridas!
This is Garridas, a little town in the center of Portugal. With only 2 inhabitants, this is one of the smallest towns in the region. Garridas is located in the municipal of Castelo Branco, with capital city of Castelo Branco. In the 70s, a lot of inhabitants from these villages here moved away in search for more prosperity, moving to bigger cities like Lisbon or Porto, or even abroad to countries like France and Switzerland. For the last couple of years, people see opportunities again and are starting to come back to these regions.
This is basically the main square of the village, the plaza. This is the main road coming into the village, which the house you all know, the first house in the village, my house. Now you all know this house, of course, but I have some facts about this house that you don't know. Did you know that my house was one of the first houses built in this village? I asked some people and we don't exactly know how old it is. The estimations are 200, 250 years old. At first it was only the middle part, what they made one house. And then while the family extended, they split up the house and made it actually 2 houses. Later in the 70s or 80s, they added on both sides some additions to the house. You can see this because it's the newer blocks, the breeze blocks, tijolo. And only the middle part of my house is schist. What is also a fun fact about my house is, you may have noticed, my house has 2 gates. That is because this part, from here to that corner there, it actually was a separate piece of land that was bought by the owners of my house somewhere in the 60s or 70s. It also contained the mini building already. And this is about, what would it be, 300, 400 square meters? Maybe a little less. They bought it for, in our money now, 40 euros. Including the building. Right next to my house you have another house that was one of the first houses that was built in this village. That is this property here. It also consists of 2 houses that are connected together. And a whole row of sheds. And like my house, it has a big piece of land next to the house. I think it's quite about the same size as my house, as the land on my house. But, as you all know, I also have a shed, this thing here. But this property has 2. A little bit smaller and more decayed. But the piece of land here is a lot bigger than my piece of land. And it's nicely terraced. It's not nicely cut. And if you have been following along with my journey here in the ghost town, you should know who owns this land. No? This is owned by LAR, an elderly home. And what happens here in Portugal is that when people need to go to the elderly home, most of the people here didn't have a lot of money. So what they did is they gave their property in return for care. And I think 4 years ago, the lady who owned this, she died. And from that moment the properties can be sold. So 3 years ago I did a request at this elderly home for buying this property, and I'm still asking. 3 anos. I don't want to get my hopes up, but there might be coming some progress in that soon. The woman who lived here, her name was Maria Joana, and probably the inscription here is still from her dad or her grandfather maybe. But she was the last woman who lived here, and she was the aunt of the woman who owns this house. And this is a very nice house, and they're also renovating it at the moment a little bit, the inside. And it has a very big piece of land all around, even down to the river. As you can see, a very nice garden. I hope our garden someday will look like that. She has a lot of produce. She also has chickens. She doesn't live here though. She lives in another village. This is sort of her farm. And I think it was her aunt, Maria's one. And she's constantly asking like, when are you going to buy the house? You don't want the house anymore? Yes, Fatima, I do want the house. It's just that the elderly home, Santa Casa, they're taking a long time. This is my shed. You all know my shed. And we're back on the plaza. So that is basically the whole Rua de Barrocas. That's it. 2 properties, because my property is actually on the main road, the Rua Principal. But we're first going here, to the Rua da Fonte. While we go there, we come past this little shed. And this shed is owned by Maria. If you follow the channel, you know Maria. She also lives on the Rua da Fonte. And we'll get to her house in a bit. But she owns this property together with, I think it's her cousin. But he doesn't want to sell. He doesn't even want to talk. We also have a bus stop here. Yeah, so what actually happens is that the bus doesn't really come into the village. It's a taxi service that takes you to the nearest bus stop. Welcome to the Rua da Fonte. At the back of this road, Rua, is the font, surprisingly. So, very small street with some houses on both sides. This is a double house. The part here was sold, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, if I remember correct, by the family of Maria to another Portuguese guy. He doesn't live here, he comes here not very often. And this is a whole row of very small little houses that mostly belong to the family of Maria. And as you can see from above, it's very dense built area, very crowded. And for this whole block, the owners and who own certain properties is not very clear to me, but one thing is clear, and that it's mostly family of Maria. Because Maria's family was located mostly here on this part of the village. Also in the main road they have a couple of properties. This first property here you'll hear more about soon. This is where Maria lives. This used to be a very small schist ruin, and I think in the 70s they extended the whole house. It's now a very nice big building. She also has a very nice garden behind there. Yeah, and that's basically it for the Rua da Fonte. The font is over there. This is our font. There's not much of a fountain here though, but very nice, fresh, cold water. It does have a little downstream here. You can see how much water there's still in the aquifer. I think it's called an aquifer. Like the whole part here above is like where the water seeps down into this probably water mine. Would be interesting to see someday what's behind here. At the end of summer, this is all full with grapes and peaches, I think. Some other fruits. Looks pretty nice, like the end of summer. Yeah, so here is where we fill up our drinking water very regularly. 2 years ago we were also taking showers here when it was like 45 degrees. At the end of the day you have the sunset here on the opposite side. It's really magical. And here we are back at the main square. Praça República. This is the main street, Rua Principal. This is where most of the houses are. And this is also where my other land is. Completely on the other side. So this place you know, right? This is Maria's garage and Maria's adega. And here I think the aunt of Maria used to live here. And this extension they made later on, the garage, and that I'm also allowed to use. This is where the quads are. And then we have this. So these were actually 3 small ruins with 3,500 square meters of land behind it. And in the first year I was here, the middle ruin fell down. This one is also almost ready to fall down. This was or is owned by one of the brothers who also sold me the house. And they offered it to me. It was way too expensive, the money they wanted for it, so I passed at that point. Apparently after that it's sold to somebody else, and they have been working on it a little bit, but now I haven't seen them anymore. I think it was sold, but yeah. A lot of times it's a mystery in Portugal what is happening with certain properties. In my town here, it appears to be extra difficult. This appears to be one of the towns where the people didn't update much of the property ownership and borders of properties. What makes it sometimes very difficult to buy or own. Or we come to in a bit we come to my land, and yeah, we have a very special case there at the moment. This whole row, yeah, we know who the owners are. Some of these are very complicated because multiple owners that are in different countries and don't want to show up to sign something or stuff like that. And people also who don't want to sell. If we turn around, we have this building here, located next to my house. This whole part, including the carport here, This is from family of Maria, as is most of it on this side. But the woman who owned this sold the left part to somebody, and later on she sold also the right part to somebody else. So now these are 3 buildings instead of 1, with 3 different owners. 3 different sets of owners. Each property might have 3 or 4 sons who inherited it. So this will be probably quite impossible to buy also. Now, as we move further down the road here, there's some interesting stuff. If you've been following the channel, and I suppose you do, then you know that this building there in the middle, I bought this on an auction, but I only bought half the ownership. And we're negotiating with the guy who owns the other half, but he's not willing to sell. And he's also not willing to buy my part. But the communications are going very slow and sluggish. And I think there is a little misconception in the idea of what we're trying to buy or sell to him. It's a very complicated story, but he also probably owns this house. And I think that he thinks that the negotiations are about this house and not about that shed. Yeah, it's all a difficult situation. Then we have this big building here. This was one of the last residents of the ghost town, Manel. Apparently he passed away like a year or 2 years before I came here. So I never knew him, but I know his family. And I met them in Sarzedes, and they're friends of mine. And apparently they are also family of Maria. I didn't know that. About 2 months ago I was picking some oranges at Maria, and they suddenly showed up. So I started talking to them about the house. And yeah, we're now informing if there's any possibility that the family would come together and want to sell the house. It's a nice building, it needs some work though. Talking about nice buildings, this is one of the nicer houses in the village. It's right opposite of the shed I was just talking about. My shed, half of it. And the first thing I thought when I came here was it must be inhabited. The laundry is outside. Well, I can tell you, the laundry's been hanging there for 3 years. I found out pretty soon already, 2 years ago I think, that the laundry is hanging there to make it look like it's inhabited. For specific reasons, of course. Yeah, Maria tells me that these people, they live in France, and they haven't been here for a long time. It's being kept by another family that lives around the area. And as I understand from Maria, she like via tried to inform if anybody is willing to sell, and she got a very big no. It's a beautiful house though, and it's right next to the community oven. That is actually community property. Well, municipal property more. The cutest house in the village. I'm saying that wrong. It's the cutest front wall in the village. There's not much left behind here. But yeah, this was one of the houses I liked from one of the first moments I came here. I think it's the blue. It's my favorite color. This is a difficult story. Another difficult story. I talked to the people who lived here for 40 years, but they never got the papers registered in their name. And if they want to do anything with it, they need to start claiming that they've been there for so long. But the people who own the papers of the house, who actually have the papers of the house, they're also still around. So that might be a never-ending story. Until a couple of months ago, I had no idea who owned it. I'm still not sure, but a couple of weeks ago, there was a tractor here cutting the grass around the house. And this part belongs to the house. I don't think it's the owner himself, but at least we should be able to track down the next time he comes who owns this. It's very cute. It's a little bit, the wall is a little bit shifting though, up there. Very nice tree bush in front of it, like it blooms like very big pink flowers. Looks really cool. You guys are getting a proper tour here. You're hearing almost everything I know about the town at the moment. This is a funny house also. And it has a funny story. I should have taken a chair. Let me check if I got it in frame. Look at the antenna.
Wow. Trekken.
Family of Maria, yes. It's a cute little little house that ends up like in a sort of a point, and it comes with the big piece of land here in front. It's a cousin of Paulo, the son of Maria, so family of Maria. And in the first year I got here, there was a sign on the door with a phone number. And I had a friend of mine call, and she was a little bit hesitant in giving information because she thought it was an agent who wanted to try and sell the house for her. Later on, we tried to get in touch with her again, but then she removed the number from the door, and I think she just isn't ready to sell yet. A lot of these properties here have emotional value for the people, and it's sometimes difficult to get them to sell the property even though they don't do much with it. So that's a shame. But yeah, I can understand. Paulina, if you're ever willing to sell, come talk to me.
Wow. Daar kan dus gewoon. Zwaar. Waar ze gewoon? Dat kan ze gewoon. Zwaar.
Then we have this house. This is very well kept. It is from a family that lives in Lisbon and sometimes comes here for their holidays. They also have plans. This also belongs to them, this ruin. And they want to renovate it and maybe rent it out. We're almost at the end of the street, guys. That's where my other land is. Let's see. This is the next property. a very big house, and it belongs also to the brother of the guy who sold me my house. And in the beginning he dropped some numbers for wanting to sell it, some very high numbers. It does also come with this part, what is a house in itself. It goes down the hill on the back side. It's quite big also. And this is actually 3 stories. So there's one story that you can't see, that's on the back side of the mountain. And then here, and there's also a sort of storage in the top. And that also comes with quite a big piece of land behind the house. Here also they have been doing some work on the house. I don't know if it's to sell the house or to live in it. No idea. No idea yet. This is a very cute house. This is the last house in the street on this side, and it has a very cute balcony on the back, and that's mainly why I like it so much. It looks out over the back of the valley. Quite good condition still. I never saw people here until 3 weeks ago. They came to cut the grass. I only saw it on camera, so I wasn't able to introduce myself. Yeah, very well kept, nice building from the outside. Here goes the road to the next village, Juaninho. And this is basically the end of the Rua Principal. This is my land. And this is a double house. The part on the left, people sometimes come here for their holiday, very sporadically. They painted it last year. And the house next to that, yeah, it's funny. The Portuguese finance office has, in Portuguese it's called leilões. It's an auction, and the finance department sometimes reclaims buildings or cars or other stuff because of debt. And this building was, I suppose, claimed in that way. And I saw it on the auction site. It was sold in 2017. For 600 euro. Quite a big piece of land behind it and some other buildings. 2017. 600 euros. And here we are. The Bananeira. Bananeira. This region on the map it's called Bananeira. There are different explanations for that word. If there's any Portuguese who can tell me what might be the most logical explanation? Bananeira, Bananeira, Bananeira. So, my land consists of 2 articles. And basically both articles have a ruin. One is down there. And one is the one behind this nice little house that's falling apart. The ruin, my ruin is falling apart. Not the nice little house. But this nice little house here, they told me when I bought this land that this house was not included. They told me that they would part it from the parcel, from the property, before I would buy it. Now, when I was signing the papers, I already saw that it was still on there. So I thought, maybe they made a mistake. Maybe I'm getting more land. I don't know. Maybe the changes are still needing to happen. I don't know in Portugal. But apparently I still own the piece of land that is below this ruin. ruin, nice little house. And also on my description from what is on this land, it says that that parcel, where I have one ruin, the property description says it contains 2 ruins. So to my assumption, that was probably also a ruin and they fixed it. Back then, 1.5 years ago, we got in contact with the person who owns this little house, and I offered her some money for this little house. And we got the story that it was like very emotional value and she'd never thought about selling it, and maybe in the future, when she would be willing, then she would contact us. About 9 months ago, there comes a real estate agent and puts a sign on this little house for sale. We're now talking with lawyers about who actually owns this thing. Can they sell it without papers? I mean, I have the paper for the land. How could you sell it? So yeah, this little town has a lot of complications in property ownership, and also finding out like who owns what. But that's mostly the case in abandoned villages in Portugal. It's very hard to locate the actual owners of the properties, unless there's somebody still around who knows. Luckily I have Maria and her family, of course, who are to thank for most of the information I get about my village and helping me to find stuff out and even acquire stuff. So a big thank you goes out to Maria and her family, of course, Paulo and the kids. Besides making me feel very welcome here in Portugal, they also slowly enable me to realize my dream here.